Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I drop my kid off at school and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Good morning, dear listeners. I hope that you are staying warm because I am dang cold. It is November 9th. And according to Google, it feels like 12 degrees outside. It is a balmy 18 though, so I guess I don't need to worry about that. That is Fahrenheit. I don't really know the Celsius number for that, but 32 is 0 Celsius, so if that helps at all. So some degrees below 0 Celsius. Anyhow, I'm enjoying a brisk walk home, and I thought I'd talk to you a little bit today. I wasn't entirely sure what to talk about, but then I decided to do a combination shooting from the hip and follow up to the discussion of overpowered. So you'll recall a few weeks ago, I did a discussion about the concept of overpowered, sort of responding to the Rodney Smith video on the Watch It Played channel, and thinking a little bit about what it means to say something is overpowered. So I just wanted to put that in your mind as I talk about Nanty Narking. Okay, so today's Shootin' from the Hip episode is going to be about Nanty Narking, the new Martin Wallace re-theme of his old Discworld Ankh-Morpork game. Nanty Narking was created by Phalanx Games and was published recently and quite successfully, I thought. The box art is great, the board art and cards are great, the miniatures are really good, they're very well detailed and everything, but they feel very delicate. In fact, one of my miniatures broke in shipping. The head broke off, so I'm not convinced that I should contact them and make them spend a bunch of money. I don't really care that much. I'm just going to see if I can super glue it back on. Otherwise, I'll have one miniature with no head. It's not a big deal. The miniatures could be pawns. They really don't make much difference. Although the game does come with these special ability cards that affect the particular miniature you have. So that's something to think about as I move forward. But okay, so Nanty Narking, like I said, it's a reskin of Discworld Ankh-Morpork. So if you've played that game, you've played 99% of the stuff in this game. From what I understand, all of the cards are straight reskin. The only change is that they've added some alternate personality cards to balance things out about that. We'll come back in a little bit. So the way Nanty Narking works, it is a sort of area control game. It is a people on the map game. There's no war. It's all about trying to control spaces. And it's very easy to put things on and take things off. In the game, you are one of 8 key figures trying to influence Victorian London. The game is made up of real-life personages like some of the various lords of the House of Lords, scientists like Charles Babbage and Charles Dickens and Karl Marx, and fictional characters like Fagin from Great Expectations, or actually Oliver Twist, Fagin from Oliver Twist, or Sherlock Holmes, and lots of characters from a variety of Victorian age. In the game, you are trying to influence London and be in control of it in the way that fits your character. At the end of the game, each player gets one of the 8 controlling characters, each of which has a different win condition. 3 of them are trying to control a certain number of areas on the board. If you're playing, and that number that they're trying to control changes depending how many players are in the game. One of the characters is trying to have figures distributed throughout the board on a certain number of places. One of the characters is trying to have a certain number of trouble markers out on the board. Trouble markers are these indicators that things are going crazy in the city. And then, what else? There's one character who's trying to have a lot of money. That might be it. And then there's one character who wins if no one else wins. Because the way the game works is at the beginning of your turn, before you do anything else, you can declare that you've won. So if at the beginning of your turn, you have met the win condition for your character, you win the game. Otherwise, you play your turn by playing a card and following the actions that are depicted in the corner of the card. The actions can let you put pawns on the board, move pawns around, take other people's pawns off, earn money, build buildings, which are sort of permanent pawns that give you powers in the place that you build them, and also control. There's also these things, like I said, called trouble markers. When you put pawns on or move them off, that also changes the trouble markers on the board. You also can manipulate those directly. There are special events that happen, which are almost always bad. And then you can also get more cards. At the end of your turn, you get 5. You draw back up to 5 no matter what. If you get to the end of the game and no one has won, so the game ends when the deck of cards runs out. So as you're going through, you draw cards. When the deck of cards runs out, the game ends. If no one had declared that they won by then Sherlock Holmes can win. Sherlock Holmes wins if no one else won. Alternately, if no one is Sherlock Holmes, because there are more roles than there are players, then you go to this point thing to determine who wins. I thought it was pretty fun. A good, tight knife fight game, by which I mean every action you're taking is directly competing with other people. So you have to very quickly kind of get used to people putting your stuff on, taking your stuff off, messing with you. That's part of the game. You're constantly messing with other players. Also, because anybody could win based on where their pieces are, there's some discussion component about, do you talk to each other about who's winning, or do you sit quietly and don't talk about who's winning? I ended up drawing the Sherlock card, so I ended up talking a lot about who's winning because I win if nobody wins. So it's in my interest to really motivate the other players to stop people from winning, even if we aren't sure what win conditions are. My goal was to never have anyone meet any of the win conditions, which makes it easy to keep people from winning. The components are very nice. I did spend the extra $15 or whatever to get metal coins, which are pretty snazzy, and I like metal coins. They make for a fun experience there. The miniatures are all very nice, sculpted with detail, and the buildings are all sculpted nicely, so it gives the table a lot of presence, and it's fun to sort of think about which agent you're putting out. The game did come with a little expansion set of cards that makes the different agents do different things, gives you sort of special powers. So that's a fun way to reimagine or to add nuance to the game. So overall, I really liked it. A nice 1 hour to 1.5 hour. I mean, it took us just over 1.5 hours, but it was our first game. I imagine experienced players would knock this out in an hour easily. A nice little medium weight knife fight game. I really liked it. Looking forward to playing it again. I could see it being a game I'll play more often, although you have to have the right group because it is so directly confrontational. It's not generally my kind of game unless I go in knowing it's going to be that kind of game. Sort of like Mission Red Planet or Nexus Ops. So anyway, I liked it really well. The art is very nice. The board is good, although it feels pretty generic. We had a bunch of people come by and say like, oh, is this Tammany Hall or is this the Godfather game? Just because the board looks like a old-timey city. It's got a kind of muted tone. You actually, on the back of the board is a very muted tone that's almost illegible in terms of where the areas are. So we used the more colorful one, but still pretty muted. So when we got to the end of the game and I won because no one else had won, we talked a little bit about the problem of the Sherlock character. Now I would say it was our first play, so none of the other players were doing what they should have done. I've read a little bit. I went online and posted some questions and read a little bit about how do you defeat the Sherlock character, because it seems unfair. And one of the things is that people say is like, your first priority needs to be winning. Second priority is keeping other people from winning. Otherwise you help the Sherlock character too much. Also, don't waste cards. You don't want to do long chains of lots of cards unless it's going to win you the game or get close, because every card you draw pushes closer to Sherlock winning. So Sherlock is a stopgap against people going crazy with the long chains of actions, because it makes it easier for Sherlock to win. That said, some people did say that that character is a little more likely to win if they're in the game with good players. And so the alternate variant that adds, so the alternate variants add a secondary condition that everybody needs to meet in order to win. It just adds a little bit more difficulty to the game. But I think probably in future we'll either take Sherlock out or use the variant one, because here's the thing for me. And this is where it goes back to the overpowered conversation we had earlier. On one hand, part of me is like, well, I don't know that we really can say Sherlock's overpowered yet. We've only played it once. It was our first game for everybody. Nobody had any strategy yet. None of us were really thinking about how do you stop the Sherlock character by, slow playing kind of, or underusing cards. That said, from a purely mechanical standpoint, all the other characters have to do something particular to win or have the most points at the end. But in order to win, they also have to keep everyone else from winning. So they have two things they have to watch for: furthering their own goal and preventing everyone else from winning. By contrast, the Sherlock character doesn't have to put any energy into winning themselves. So one way to do it is, if you think it's possible there's a Sherlock character in the game, is to make them do more of the work. Say, like when that person says, oh, that trouble marker, if there's 8 troubles, they're going to win. I'm like, well, I can't take any out. You're going to have to do it. Really push the other people, call their bluff, make the Sherlock character do more of the preventative work. And then you can concentrate on not being prevented yourself. That's the main strategy that I've heard. That and don't play cards unnecessarily. If you think Sherlock's in the game, don't discard your whole hand and draw a new one. That helps Sherlock. It's a challenge, I think. Like I said, I'm not sure whether we'll keep it. At the same time, I really would enjoy playing it a couple more times before I mess with it too much. Because I want to get a feel for how it is to play one of the characters who has a direct motivation. And what happens if we play and I'm not constantly counting everything and saying out loud what people are doing. I mean, I probably will do that some anyway, but I don't know, the talkative level in this game, I'm not sure how it works. So that's my take on Nanty Narking. If you're someone who gets to play games with me in person sometimes, I'd be happy to try it with you. I think it's a really interesting game and fun and short, which are all things I like. If you are going to try it yourself, I'd encourage you to think or ask about the Sherlock character and think about how does Sherlock shape the way people are going to win. Well, that's about it for me today. Thanks for joining me on my walk. What have you tried lately? Pop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let us know. And until next time, thanks for joining me on my walk. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. Sherlock. How does Sherlock shape the way people are going to win? Well, that's about it for me. Today. Thanks for joining me on my walk.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.